copy of a copy of a copy of a copy copy. Deja vu.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Deja Reviewed podcast, where we talk about the original versions of TV shows and movies that were later rebooted. For season 1, we're discussing The Twilight Zone. I'm Michael.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're talking about season 1, episode 34, titled The After Hours. And The After Hours originally aired on June 10th, 1960. It was directed by Douglas Hayes, written by Rod Serling, starring Rod Serling and Frances Elizabeth Allen.
There is a fifth dimension.
Both shadow and substance of things and
suddenly up ahead.
Just cross over. You're moving into what lands another dimension.
Next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Here's the opening voiceover from The After Hours. Express elevator to the 9th floor of a department store, carrying Miss Marcia White on a most prosaic, ordinary run-of-the-mill errand. Miss Marcia White on the 9th floor, specialties department, looking for a gold thimble. The odds are that she'll find it, but there are even better odds that she'll find something else, because this isn't just a department store. This happens to be the Twilight Zone.
And from IMDb, the description is, a woman is treated badly by some odd salespeople on an otherwise empty department store floor. Really bearing the lead on that.
That's a bizarre description.
Yeah, that is true. That did happen.
Better description would be a woman has a weird experience in a department store and finds out she's not who she thinks she is, or something like that.
So the director, Mark Douglas Hayes, directed a few we've seen before, and When the Sky Was Opened, which I very much liked. Elegy, which I think we didn't hate. And one we very much hated, The Chaser.
Yes, that is one of our 2 one-star episodes.
Yeah.
I will say, and I don't want to spoil kind of exactly where we end up, and I think this might be a good one to discuss the rating. I have a feeling that my perceptions of this were skewed after seeing several episodes in a row that were really bad, just to have one that I didn't think was horrible. I was thinking it was better than it was, and then I took a step back. I'm like, this wasn't really that good, but it's definitely a step above The Chaser in my book.
I actually thought it was really good. I was pleasantly surprised by this episode. So I don't think it was just perception of how bad the last few episodes have been. I really like this episode, and right off the bat, this straight up felt like a Twilight Zone episode again, which I feel like we haven't had in a long time.
Yeah, and even some of the ones that I think we, obviously we've seen several lately that we didn't particularly like. Even some of the ones we liked more, it feels like it's been a while since we had a classic what you think of as the Twilight Zone episode, and this very much fit. I will say, I'm sure we'll get to other parts of it. I'm with you on, I liked it a lot until the end. I thought this was one where the sort of payoff did not live up to the sort of setup, but most of the way through this, I was very intrigued. I thought it did a great job of creating that Twilight Zone sort of something's off, but you're not quite sure what or where it's going. And it was the first one in a while that was not super predictable. I feel like a lot of these we've known from minute 2 exactly what's going to happen, and it very much plays out like that. And this one kind of kept you guessing, and there were a lot of little twists and red herrings. I actually really liked the store manager, I think Mr. Sloan was his name, who reminded me of the hotel clerk the hotel manager from the first Ghostbusters on their first job where they encounter Slimer, where he's like, well, all the original staff know about the 12th floor, the disturbances, He looks kind of like that guy, and kind of had the same vibe to him when his assistant is like, oh, she said about the 9th floor, and he's like, the 9th floor. And I really thought there was going to be something where he knew about something going on the 9th floor. That ended up not being paid off, but I also I don't feel like that was cheating. It was he was confused because there is no 9th floor.
Yeah, he did look like that guy. I didn't make that connection. That's very true.
I actually thought for a second it might be the same guy, but I'm like, no, he's older.
Would have been way too
old. Yeah, he's older
yeah.
in this than he would have been 20 years later when they're making Ghostbusters. Yeah. So Anyhow, but there were a lot of twists, and I thought this. You're absolutely right. This felt like a Twilight Zone, and that was welcome after several that, good or bad, mostly bad, but good or bad, kind of didn't. Like they felt like something else.
And I think that there were a lot of things that when I didn't, because I remembered this episode, I did not remember the payoff right off the bat.
Okay.
There were a lot of questions that I was like, well, wait a minute. Like when the woman's like, may I show you something? And she's like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. It's like, well, how do you know what she was going to show you? The clerk asked Marcia White. And I was like, well, how do you know? And then there was like the elevator was very much reminding me of the Karen on the River Styx. It was like this sort of passage into the afterlife, which isn't really what this is. But one thing that I was going to ask the question,
thought it might be going that way. Like that's what I like. They had a lot of these little things where you weren't sure where it was going to go again, which was a welcome.
Don't tell me what I
thought.
thought.
Unpredictable. Mike, let me explain your brain to you.
Yeah. So, and then one of the things that I thought was so bizarre until I knew what the payoff was Marcia takes a nap basically on a fainting couch, for lack of a better word. And then everyone forgets about her lying on this couch and just leaves and locks up the store. And she wasn't like she wasn't back in an office or something. Someone would have definitely noticed this woman sleeping when they were locking up. But, and we'll just spoil the ending now, she's a mannequin, and they didn't, of course, there's just a mannequin lying on a couch. It was not a big deal that they locked up and just left without her. And I thought that in hindsight, I'm like, oh, yeah, that works. That makes sense.
Yeah, I do think, and I think one of my issues with the payoff was not, like, there's actually an interesting idea to be had about, you know, the mannequins can come to life, and they had this system where each one gets to, like, go out and live for a month and then comes back and does their mannequin duty or whatever. They're on a rotation. That was a little cheap, but I was willing to go with it. I think the issue for me was there wasn't a lot of explanation or follow through on it. And I get it's a short, it's 25 minutes, and I might have been expecting too much for that. But something like that, what you just explained is really cool. Like would have actually made a lot of sense. Like, oh, they saw a mannequin lying on the couch for some reason and you know, left it there. But there was no explanation. You kind of had to bring that to it. There was no explanation or note that like when she falls asleep, she looks like a mannequin or turns back into her sort of mannequin statue self or anything.
Yeah, but to be fair, like Fight Club, only in rewatching Fight Club are you like, oh, he never really, like when he's beating himself up in the parking lot, and like they did show some glimpses back to that. And I know we've referenced Fight Club a lot of times. But you do have to do like a little bit of work yourself and be like, oh, that now makes sense that they would have abandoned her in the store because she was just lying down like a mannequin, or she's always been a mannequin. Maybe. Or looks like a mannequin to them.
The thing that her on the couch reminded me of was Home Alone, which we talked about last week a little bit, which if you remember the beginning of that is basically they're all rushing to get into the car. And in that case, he is, Kevin, the Macaulay Culkin character, is kind of up in the attic or some sort of tucked away room a little bit, but they're just like in a rush and everyone gets distracted and forgets about him. And I thought they did do a nice job with this, where there was the other clerk and the assistant manager both like, we're going to go check in on her, and got distracted by other things and, you know, ran off to do other stuff and then just forgot to go back to her. So I thought that was kind of nicely set up. But I do see what you're saying, that like when she was laying down, did she just look like a mannequin? Would she revert to mannequin form? Because they obviously saw her as a person the whole time she was, the month or whatever she was out. Right. When you talk about that month that she was out, it very much reminded me of Rumspringa for the mannequins.
Oh, yeah. That they had this like month of freedom. And I actually really, maybe the payoff wasn't as satisfying as it could have been, but I really liked the mannequin community. Like they were very like protective of each other and very fair. And the one lady was like, hey, you came back a day late, so now I'm missing a day of my Rumspringa, for lack of a better term for it. And the mannequin community was trying to get her back, like not shock her back into their little mannequin world, but like was kind of like, Marcia, come on back, like as these sort of frozen mannequins. And this was one of the creepier, I thought, episodes.
Yeah, if I can jump off of that point you were just making for a second, I totally agree with you. The community was very nice, and I actually was wondering, well, why do they need to go out in the real world? It seems like they have quite a nice little community going on here, or at least, you know, maybe that's why they're willing to go for a month and come back. Like, it's not like you're frozen as a mannequin except for 1 month. It's like every night the mannequins come to life and they hang out and seem friendly. And even the person who lost a day said that not in a like, I'm super angry at you and you're screwing me over kind of way, but kind of like reminding her of like that they're a community and, you know, they all have a responsibility to each other and her actions don't just affect her, affect others, which I think, you know, is certainly a relevant message in today's day and times. Like, yeah, you know, even if it's inconvenient for you to wear a mask or, you know, not go out and party at the bar, like we're a community and things only work if everybody kind of does their part. So I agree with you. I thought that they were really nice there. And the other thing I wanted to say about the mannequin community before we move on from that, because I feel like the ending was really my nitpick with this. I mean, it was maybe bigger than a nit, but my issue with this episode up through the sort of what the payoff was, I was very much with them. The other thing that kind of bugged me a little bit about it is it didn't necessarily jive with what we saw happening before. So when she went up to the 9th floor and the one clerk there was this same person, what the clerk was doing there didn't seem, even in hindsight, like if you went back and watched it again, didn't seem like it was designed to help her see she was really supposed to be a mannequin or come back. It seemed designed more to weird her out or treat her as a human, but strangely. And that to me kind of didn't make sense with what the payoff was that they were trying to kind of get her to do her job and come back.
Yeah, and before we get away from the elevator too, because that guy was also creepy, but not.
Was
really
he a mannequin too?
I don't know. I kind of thought, I assumed he was because he took her to the floor that doesn't exist or whatever. But I thought it was interesting that he said, she talked about the other elevator, which who knows if anyone else can even see it because she got on when all these other people were waiting for this other elevator. But he says, she's like, oh, why is this elevator, whatever? And he's like, oh, the others are all locals, which made me think of a train, which made me think back to A Stop at Willoughby. And my only other beef about and that made me sort of think of was this the passage to the afterlife. My only other thought about, my only nitpick, I guess, with the specifically the elevator guy is, did he have to manually open that door or did he not? Because sometimes it just slid open and I didn't necessarily pick up a pattern where that was an intentional choice, where sometimes he had to pull open the elevator doors and sometimes he didn't. But I don't know if you noticed that. Sometimes they just slid open and sometimes they didn't.
I did. And there's also a little bit of kind of magic element to it where it closes, drops her off on the 9th floor. And, you know, which is like empty. There's nothing in the cases. Looks like there's nobody there until this one clerk shows up and they just have the one thimble she was looking for, which also I was like, is that like that again didn't seem to tie into them being mannequins, how they knew she would be looking for a thimble and have apparently invented some story of her mother wanting a gold thimble. But then when after she buys it and like walks back towards the elevator doors open again and the guy is in there, but it's like, was he in there peering out the doors like through a crack to see like, and I think that's the kind of thing that to me kept this from necessarily being a great episode, was there were a lot of these little details that worked to be creepy and weird and create the mood, but didn't all add up and really make sense after you knew the twist in the end, in the same way that some of the best episodes of Twilight Zone we've seen have.
Do you think she made up that story? Because I thought there was an additional layer of creepiness to the fact that these mannequins think that they have these backstories, or that they do have these backstories that are... I thought that she believed that she had a mother and she was looking for this thimble. I think she thought that she was a real person the whole time. I never got the impression that she knew she was a mannequin until it got called out to her at the very end. I think she thought that she was a person, and I don't know if that was a matter of, maybe that's why they have the 30-day rule, because if you stay one day too long, you start to think you're an actual person.
No, I think you're right, and actually it reminded me a little bit of Inception, another fantastic movie to throw on our recommendation list. But when they're inside the dream and kind of like people don't realize they're inside the dream and that things don't quite make sense until it's pointed out. And there's that great scene with Leonardo DiCaprio and Ellen Page where they're like at a restaurant and he's like, how did we get here? And she like, it's until somebody points it out. She's like, oh, wait, are we in a dream right now? I don't know how we got here. And I kind of thought the same thing, like her mind had created this world. I'm totally with you. I think she thought she was a real person, and it's unclear if that was her being out in the world too long, if it's something her mind created to make sense of, just built this story around her, if she was kind of in a dream. Like, I don't know if you're a mannequin during the times where you're awake. Is that like your dream life for us? I don't know. Like, there were a lot of really interesting questions raised that I think the episode not just didn't have time to explore, which it's certainly unreasonable to expect it to explore every possible avenue of this in 25 minutes, but that it seemed like some of those that it hadn't quite thought out, again, as well as some of those episodes that are in our, very top ratings, where it's like you watch everything back and like, oh my gosh, all of this ties back and makes sense, like in, the Fight Club or the Sixth Sense or something, where all those weird things that happened really did, work in lockstep. And here, some of them I think didn't quite make sense in hindsight. But we're talking a lot about negatives. I think about an episode it seems like both of us liked. I wanted to give a shout out. We talked, or at least I mentioned last time, that one of the things I like about our show is that we don't just hit the story, which is obviously important, but talk about other aspects as well. And I want to say, I thought this episode was really nicely shot. This might have been one of the best shot episodes we've seen. They had some great camera work and shot design through the whole floor of the mall, or I should say department store, tracking with her around the store, around other people. It's this bustling place. Like, this felt like a movie in terms of how it was shot and the sort of number of extras and the space feeling very big and real, and like you could kind of go anywhere in it, even though the whole thing's set within this department store on a couple of floors. I really loved how this was shot.
I thought this was also one of the better acted episodes. I thought right from the beginning there was no weak performances, I didn't think. And I thought Marsha was great from the get-go. I thought all the people that were playing creepy characters were creepy. Like you said, you liked the sales clerk who looked like the guy from Ghostbusters. I thought it was well acted across the board.
I would agree with you with a single exception, and not even the actor as a whole, like one bit. And it's unfortunately, the very last shot of the movie or of the show. The assistant manager, when he like walks by, sees Marsha now as a mannequin, kind of double takes, and then does this weird, very hammy kind of like shrug, like, yeah, I guess she's a mannequin now, and walks away. Like that to me was the one acting misstep, and I would have just honestly ended the episode before that.
Okay, but do you remember the episode of Seinfeld where there's a mannequin that looks like Elaine at the guy who played the creepy guy who was obsessed with the mannequin of Elaine, that actor just died recently. Also Ted from Scrubs.
I know Ted from Scrubs. I don't remember that Seinfeld episode.
So there's an episode where there's a mannequin that looks exactly like Elaine. And so Elaine and George are like in the department store, and at one point they're undressing it, and George is looking at it, and Elaine gets upset enough that she steals the mannequin because it has her likeness. So
it's like undressing her.
Right.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think that it's beyond the scope of rational thought to think that the guy just thought he saw a woman who looked just like this mannequin. I don't think he thought that this woman had turned into a mannequin. I think he was like, oh, that looks just like that lady that fell asleep on our couch yesterday. Weird. I think you're probably right about that. I hope he would have had a different reaction if he actually thought she had turned into exactly.
But his reaction there, where he like looks back towards the camera and kind of gives this shrug, I just thought was pretty hammy.
For sure. So there's a lot of things that came up in this. There are a lot of references, modern day references I thought of. I'm just going to start throwing them out there.
Okay.
Toy Story was one of the things that I thought about. I think mannequins in general are incredibly horrifying and great when they're used correctly, which I think they did here. But it reminded me of I Know What You Did Last Summer, when the fisherman's kind of standing among all the mannequins and Jennifer Love Hewitt's trying to walk among them. Okay. There's a very good Xbox 360 game and sequel called Condemned, where there's a very creepy, like walking through mannequins scene in that. There was a line, "Are you happy?" which reminded me so much of Fahrenheit 451. I feel like every time someone just does the "Are you happy?" it reminds me back to Fahrenheit 451, the movie, the book, however you want to do it. And I guess those are my main references, but some more might come up as I'm thinking.
I want to get back to that line in 1 second. I just have to say, to me, the most obvious reference was the kids'
mannequin.
the kids' TV show. Well, yes, the kids' TV show Today's Special,
Oh, you talked about this before.
which was set in the department store, and at night the mannequin would come to life and interact with people.
Which I haven't seen, but I think you referenced that before.
I think I did, that is one I don't recommend watching. I am sure it would not hold up. It was not good when it aired, and is, I'm sure is not aged well. But that, like, to me, that was like, oh, this is today's special. Got it.
That's what I thought was Toy Story when you were trying to describe it to me, I think.
Maybe.
Or not Toy Story, Small Wonder.
Oh, yeah. And what was Small Wonder ended up being a robot or something?
She's a robot. Yeah,
Okay,
Vicky, the robot.
So that line, "Are you happy?" I actually really dug, like, just somebody coming right out and saying it is like, it's such a great question for all of us to think about. I was on a Zoom hangout with a friend the other day, and, and a friend who we tend to have like deeper conversations. He likes to ask those very sort of cutting questions and really like get at the heart of things and not talk around things.
Is this just therapy, or are you sure it's a friend?
It's a.
Are you paying him like $150
Well, I think it was
an hour?
therapeutic for him because we hadn't talked in a while, and he was talking, like, he's very stressed. He was at a school in a graduate program, and the school literally just went bankrupt and shut down because of the pandemic and stuff. Like, and it's one of these things like, but I think that really think about, like, are you happy? Like, we're all going about our days and trying to make it through. And I mean, particularly right now, I don't know it would be really hard to say, yes, I'm happy, right? Like, yes, I'm actually, I think, in better shape than a lot of people, partly because I have a stable job and I'm able to do a lot of my work from home, and nobody in my immediate family has come down with COVID or anything. So, there are certainly a lot of things to be thankful for, and I'm in a much better position than a lot of other people. But like everybody else, I'm certainly stressed about everything that's going on. Like, and it's hard to think you're really happy. And so I just thought that was a very profound thing. And then I love the clerk's response, because the clerk says, "Are you happy?" And Marsha's like, "That's none of your business," which is a totally reasonable response to a random department store clerk you just met asking you that. And then the clerk is like, "Really? It's none of my business." Okay. And like, that was another great performance, because it's very clear it is her business, and that she does know Martha.
And she's specifically the one who's getting her time taken away from her Rumspringa by Martha.
Yeah. So I just really dug that. That was super creepy. And that one was, I thought, paid off well at the end. Like, you understood that. But it was a super creepy, intriguing interaction there.
Can I give a couple other really good things, especially since you just talked about how you liked this was shot? Mm-hmm. I thought that this was, I did think I wasn't super scared by it, and I'm a total baby about horror movies, but I thought this was a legit scary episode. And actually, let me hold that till after our break. But I do want to point out one thing before that. I really liked the shot of Martha looking through this window that was sort of pebbled glass.
Yes.
That made her look very mannequin-y. And I assume that was intentional foreshadowing.
But like sort of pushing her face up against it, and it's all distorted. That was a fantastic like shot, and didn't feel weird or unnatural or out of place. It was like creepy, but like felt appropriate to what was happening in the situation.
And that was the first kind of trigger to my memory. I'm like, oh, I think she's a mannequin. And that was the first, because I of course have seen this before in my, just so long ago that I didn't remember what the payoff was, but that was very satisfying, I thought. Let's take a quick break, because I've got some bigger themes too we can talk to on the other side of the break. Okay, welcome back. We are still discussing a nice respite of good Twilight Zone episode.
I feel like the last 3 or 4 episodes we've come back and we're like, well, we're unfortunately talking about this episode.
Exactly. Yeah, but we're still talking about the after hours. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Mark, that this episode kind of made me hit home, sort of a general Twilight Zone feel. I think when I was growing up, I don't know what I would have considered the Twilight Zone. Do we think the Twilight Zone is more horror or more sci-fi? Because I've always sort of pictured it as sci-fi, but like the sort of eerie twists and super creepy things that happen, or maybe horror isn't the way to say it, but suspense versus sci-fi. And not that you can't be both, but I guess I have in watching 34 episodes into season 1 and kind of breaking them down a little more analytically, I feel like I'm seeing it's kind of more less sci-fi and more like suspense or creepy horror. What do you think?
I think that's a really good question, and if I can kind of play both sides there a little bit, and I guess I'm going to go specifically to kind of like what our perception of the Twilight Zone is, and we talk about like this felt like a Twilight Zone episode. I think the question you raise is really good, and I think part of it for me, I guess, is that there's a disconnect between the intellectual and emotional side. In the sense of, like, when I think of the Twilight Zone, if somebody asked me to describe it sort of outside this podcast and what the sort of popular perception, including my own, was, I would think sci-fi. And when we see sci-fi elements in some of these episodes, we're like, okay, this feels Twilight Zone-y, that there's a spaceship or aliens or whatever. But as I'm watching through an episode, the ones that feel Twilight Zone-y to me are the ones that are very suspenseful. And so that emotional reaction to me, I think, is what I want the Twilight Zone to feel like. But in terms of the stories, what I think of the Twilight Zone as is more sci-fi. And particularly if you think about the episodes we've liked the most, tend to be the ones where it really raised some questions or made us think, which is something I think of more in the vein of good sci-fi than necessarily good thriller or suspense or horror. That tends to be more about creating this mood and emotion. And I'm not saying that suspense or horror movies can't raise interesting questions as well, because sometimes they do. But those are more about creating this vibe and suspense and the getting you sort of emotionally invested in that way. Whereas sci-fi as a genre is very much traditionally about like making you think and raising, interesting thought questions. So I think you've hit on both. And it's interesting that I think of it as both, but in different ways.
Yeah, I that's kind of where I was landing on it when I was thinking about it. Just to give one other cool shout out when we're talking about that horror genre, I thought when she returns to the 9th floor, it was a good jump scare when the elevator doors open and the mannequin is right in her face. I thought that was neat. And it was, I was not super startled, but I was like, oh, it was a good little jump scare for the Twilight Zone, I thought.
In my notes, the mannequin being right there when she opens the door is a good jump scare. Like, right there with you. Well, we've seen a couple bad jump scares in the Twilight Zone, even in occasionally some episodes that we liked where it just felt sort of forced, and this felt totally natural.
Like the Hitchhiker.
And where the guy like just jumps in from off screen.
Camera pans across, yeah.
But it also, I think this did a nice job of putting us in Marsha's shoes. Like, we identified with her, and she was creeped out, and we were creeped out, and so we were on the same emotional journey with her. I liked that. And
Marsha also
jump scared there.
Yes, and she also did the thing that I love of protagonists in the Twilight Zone. She asked all the right questions. What the hell is going on here? And she stepped into our shoes. And I just wanted to, going back to the shooting of this, before I forget to make this point, the opening sort of chaotic department store scene, did that remind you of any previous episodes that we've kind of called out for that before? Because there's one in specifically that reminded me of.
Nothing's immediately coming to mind, so clearly it reminded you more than me.
Yes. So do you remember the opening of Perchance to Dream when there was like the outside of his psychiatrist's office, psychologist's office, they were like showing
with the revolving door and he's like waiting to go in. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I thought that the director might have been the same as when I saw that opening kind of chaos of the department store. I was like, I wonder if this is the same Perchance to Dream director. It obviously wasn't, but it had that same chaotic sort of feel to it.
And so as a filmmaker, it's just interesting what you said there, because when you describe that, I would have immediately guessed, I would have been very surprised if they were the same director, because they're going for the same feel, same emotion in the same point in the episode, like the beginning, and they're trying to set it up. And one of them accomplished that with close-ups and fast editing, and the other one accomplished it with this wide, long tracking shot through. So it's like completely opposite style going for the same thing, which isn't to say directors can't change, but if somebody asked me to guess, my guess would have been that they're different because they immediately went to completely opposite styles to accomplish that, both effectively, I think.
Yeah, agreed. That's why. So it obviously elicited the same emotion for me that it was supposed to.
I want to just point out that was technically the second shot, because the first shot is almost identical to the beginning of, what was the last episode we saw, Mr. Beavis, where they're still trying to do everything with the tilt down out of the star field, and it's a tilt down to like an exterior. In Mr. Beavis, it tilts down and we end up kind of wide exterior on a street, then cut to like close up of a window, and then we cut inside and it's supposed to be like the window was Mr. Beavis's apartment. It doesn't match. This was even more forced, and like I said, I really liked how this was shot. This was, I think, to me, one of only two kind of missteps in the shooting. And I wonder if it was just a dictate that in the Twilight Zone, we have to start with these sort of tilt downs that work out of the star field. They like tilt down to just like random side of building with window, and then cuts inside. And I guess the window was supposed to be the exterior of the department store, but it doesn't match anything. It doesn't add anything. It literally just felt like this forced like throw in to get the tilt down working. And now we move on to the episode.
I'll do the yin and the yang then I'll call it another good shot. I thought it was neat. When they were, one of the store clerks was carrying around a mannequin, and as they were carrying it through the store, they were bobbing it a little bit, so it almost looked like the mannequin was walking through the store. I thought was also a very cool shot.
Yeah, and I'm going to say once we get right in, and I could call it a lot of shots here that I thought were really good, but the first one you mentioned, when she's like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. And then Marcia like walks through the store and like behind some counters and in front of others and through, groups of people and stuff. And there's this really nice, smooth crane tracking shot that implies to me this has to have just been all a set. And it's a really well-dressed set, or they found an empty, warehouse floor or something and built this. I mean, in any case, like to have a kind of crane fit in there, particularly in the 60s with TV cameras and doing, I assume this could not have been a location shoot, but they did a really nice job there. Maybe it was, and if they did, more power to them getting out on location and getting that working. I think it was a set, but it was a really well executed set. But there's this fantastic, just like long tracking shot following her through the space, and she goes behind stuff and in front of things, and just really, really cool, showing the space, and it's very clear she's going to be our main character with the way it follows us.
Yeah.
So,
it's
well
funny,
shot director of this episode and cinematographer.
Yes. It's funny some of the things that you've called out, because I had the exact note. I thought I wouldn't like the tack-on final scene, but I actually appreciated it until the silly double take by the employee. And the tack-on scene, so after they kind of establish, first of all, I loved when Marcia realizes that she's a mannequin, and then when she kind of goes to her resting standing state, she takes on a mannequin pose with her hands kind of, her palms flat and her hands kind of slightly out, that we later see her in that pose. Thought that was super neat. And so when they went on to this tack on scene, I was like, oh, is this going to be Purple Testament where it's completely pointless? We get it. I don't think it was necessary, but I don't think it was anywhere near as bad as Purple Testament, where it ruined the episode for me. It was at least kind of a neat, hey, this bustling department store is back to business as usual. And then we see Marcia's as a mannequin back to business as usual. I thought was kind of neat, other than, again, the double take.
Yeah, and I don't think it'd be fair to, like, Purple Testament was just, that ending was unnecessary, unrelated. It was characters we hadn't seen that then started setting up this whole other side story about a harmonica or something. Like, it was so bad. And you're right, this was not unnecessary. And I think actually, if you didn't have the clerk doing the double take, could have actually been a really nice closing beat, because we see her as a mannequin. And I thought that was good closure. It's really the clerk who, I'll say, ruined it, but I mean, this isn't ruined in the same way as Purple Testament, where I think we docked that whole episode a half star just for having that scene included in it.
Yeah, unfortunately, because I love the rest of that episode.
Yeah, and this worked, and I think you could have got away without it, but it was perfectly reasonable, and it was still part of the story to show now she's up as a mannequin, still wearing the same clothes. With you on that. While we were on the shots from also near the end, I just wanted to say I really liked the shot of after the jump scare, and the clerk then like helps her up in the elevator, and they start walking, you know, back through the empty 9th floor. It's this great high angle shot, kind of looking down at everything. You see all these other like people posed like mannequins, and as they walk past, they all kind of fall in, get down off their posts and fall in behind.
Yeah, that was
the
a
whole
great
community.
shot.
That was a great.
Idea.
Again, good.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. It was well executed. It was a great use of the space, and I think a place where you could have quite reasonably like got close-ups of the different people all like stepping off their things, and that would have mirrored what happened earlier in the episode where they had like these tight close-ups of several of the different mannequins as she's hearing their voices. But I love that they didn't do that and let it all play out in this wide shot, and you just got this ever-growing procession until they get to this big space at the end where they all kind of surround Marcia. Really well set up. While we're with those people, can I just say, as she's looking around at all the people who were mannequins who we assume were modeling clothes in the department store, those are some freaky ski masks that 2 of them had on. Because she's like looking around at other people, and like someone's in a wedding dress, someone's in like a tuxedo, someone's in like day wear, and then it cuts to somebody like wearing, I thought it was like a Mexican wrestling mask, and then it cuts to the person next to them like, okay, I think those are ski masks, but these are like the freakiest ski masks ever. I thought those people were going to be like demons or something.
Yes. So, and the only thing that made me think they weren't the luchadors masks were they were actually holding skis. But your initial reaction was better than mine, because I straight up thought they were in blackface at first, and I was like, "Oh no, like this cannot be what's actually happening." So I was relieved to find out that they were ski masks. But yes, they're horrifying, like knit cap ski masks with like they almost look like GIMP masks. They were super creepy. I'm glad you called that out.
You know, I always grab find a representative still from the episode to grab, and I throw it out on the Deja Reviewed Twitter feed once the episode launches. And I was really tempted to grab a close up of one of those guys, because it would be so intriguing just to see that. But I'm like, but this has nothing to do with the episode. It would be very confusing.
Yeah.
But they're memorable. I'll give them that. But I thought that was, I don't know that it was bad, but maybe a minor misstep, because it actually pulled me out of the story for a second. I'm like, oh my God, what are those things?
Confusion.
And I
totally
think just
agree.
having, if they would have had like a stocking cap on, or like one of those little hats with a tassel on the top, like, okay, your winter gear, got it. The freaky, like covering your face GIMP mask was, ugh.
Although it did it was a relatively unsettling episode, and it did unsettle me. I mean, it did have the same feel.
That's fair. I want a super minor thing, but we in any episode where people talk about money and stuff, we tend to try to like give some sort of reference there and see what it means. So she goes to buy the.
Are you talking about the sales tax?
The sales tax was 9.6%. I went back and worked it out, which seems
said almost
high.
10%.
But
yes.
I think when I lived in Evanston, I think that was like 10.2 or something. It was like really high there.
Oh, was it that bad?
Yeah. Our sales tax here in Dallas is 8.25%, which isn't that much lower than this. Although we have no income tax, so I guess that kind of evens out. That seemed high, but I don't know what things were in 1960. I did look at inflation, so she ends up paying after tax $25 for this thimble, which in 2020 would be apparently about $217. Like that better be a nice thimble.
Well, it's gold. That's
I
what
guess,
she keeps saying.
but she also is like, oh, I'll just
thimble.
pay cash. I'm like, she was carrying 200. Where did a mannequin who came to life get $217 to buy a thimble? Anyway,
Well,
I was
what
just
else
like,
is a mannequin?
that
She only
better
has
be a
1
nice
month.
thimble.
Maybe she got her government stimulus check, and she only has 1 month out of the year to actually spend it. So that would actually be reasonable. $1,200 might last you an entire month.
That's fair. Hopefully they don't stop doing that stimulus, because otherwise the next mannequin gets out like, okay, it's my month. Like, oh crap, I have no money. What do I do for a month?
Yeah.
I got to go get a job.
I'm glad you checked on that too, because I thought the same thing. But then I was also like, when she kept saying it was a gold thimble, I was like, all right, it's. I don't know if you had anyone in your family that had this, but like thimble collections were also a thing. So I'm sure this was just like a nice collector's item that it wasn't. I'm sure that wasn't practical to use a golden thimble to actually sew. So I assume this was probably for like a thimble collection.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't know thimble collections were a thing. I was 100% assuming like she wanted it to sew. I'm like, that seems like a lot of money for something I would consider like, you know, a practical houseware. And I think that's where she asked for the first, she's like, oh, can I see housewares? I need thimbles. Sure. And then the creepy elevator guy's like, we're going to the 9th floor.
Going down.
Which again, nice little bit of production design on the elevator where the arrow that goes up and down to show you where you are. And the elevator goes up to 8 and then R, which we assume is roof. And then it goes past that to 9. Yeah. So it was really like just kind of emphasizing that there shouldn't be a 9th floor because the roof is right above 8. So I don't know where they're going to.
Right. I had one more thought kind of on this, and then that sort of taps me out. But were you thinking in the back of your mind at any point that this would be an amazing scam for a department store? If they're just like, oh, you don't have a receipt, you need to return that? Oh, yeah, well, where'd you get it? And they just tell you wherever, and you're like, oh, we don't even have that department, so you're crazy. Maybe you need to lay down. I was like, this is a great scam.
I think the lesson here is you should always get a receipt.
Yes.
I do like that the clerk who turned out to actually be a mannequin, who it was her turn next to like go out in the world, is still like is actually doing a pretty good job as a clerk, like shows her the thing like, okay, is this going to be charged?
Right, yeah.
We're gonna have to let me run your credit. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, she's lived her entire life in a department store. She probably just picked it up by osmosis.
So I praise the production a lot. I want to just quick throw out 2 minor things that were not terrible. Like we've seen much worse choices, but the 2 things that kind of jumped out to me, it didn't work. One is when she's walking around the empty department store when Marsha wakes up after hours, to throw in the title there, and they cut a few times to the close-up of her feet, and I just thought that was unnecessary and kind of weird, and the floor she's walking on and the speed she's walking never matches with when they cut back to the wide shot, and I just thought it was unnecessary. And the other thing, which I'm thankful this did not end up being where I thought it was going. The opening music is like this fast-paced, energetic, almost feels like it's going to be a comedy when the episode first starts. Yeah, and I was like, and again, we've seen several bad episodes in a row. So I was like, please don't let this be another bad one. And then it was like this cheesy, upbeat comedy music. I'm like, oh no, then it got very good very quickly, and so that didn't end up keeping me from liking it. But I thought there was a little bit of just a misstep. I think they could have done something that fit the sort of busy people going around the department store doing their business that was less cheesy to start with and kind of just bring us right into the mood we want earlier.
Yeah, it's definitely jarring compared to what the actual tone of the episode was.
But I mean, really, that was about it. I really liked most of the decisions they made. When there's a shot where she's walking around and there's a mirror in the background. We know I love our Twilight Zone mirrors. It's in the director's contract; they have to put one in every episode. But it was nice. She's like turning and looking in another direction, and then kind of catches herself in the mirror out of the corner of her eye, and like jump scares herself a little bit.
Yes.
Were you thinking, because right behind her in the mirror is a mannequin, and I was 100% sure that mannequin was going to move or come to life in the reflection, and it didn't.
Yes.
Which again was a good little twist. I didn't know where the episode was going.
Yeah. Should we get to our ratings after the closing narration then?
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Okay, our closing narration. Marsha White in her normal and natural state. A wooden lady with a painted face who, 1 month out of the year, takes on the characteristics of someone as normal and as flesh and blood as you and I. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Just how normal are we? Just who are the people we nod our hellos to as we pass on the street? A rather good question to ask, particularly in the Twilight Zone. Not my favorite of closing narrations, but still some kind of neat narratives or some neat images in it.
Yeah, good phrasings, very visual and precise as always with Serling. I'd agree. I don't think this was a bad one, but it was not one of those ones that really just like hits you.
Yeah, at least it wasn't another, hey, appreciate life and don't kill yourself like we've had for the past couple.
You should have just thrown that in because that's their theme for this, last quarter of the season or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, you want to get to ratings?
Yes, sweat.
I would say none other than the final shot of her as a mannequin, whatever they like did to mannequinize the face, looked kind of like sweat. It was like glistening, sticky or something. So I'm going to say a 2.
Okay, I'm down with a 2. Yeah, I didn't really notice it either, but it did. It was almost like there was like a plastic film over her face or something at the end of it.
Yeah, so I'm going to count that as sweat.
Okay, and then rating for our out of our 5.
I guess I'll start, and then you can talk me up or down. It sounds like maybe you're thinking up. I'm going to say 3.5, and I'd like to hear some 3.5s and kind of know where that fits. But I was really with this episode most of the way through. Like I said, I think part of it was when I saw something that wasn't immediately a disaster, I was primed to like it after several bad ones in a row. But you know, almost all the way through I was with it. I thought, like I said, the payoff at the end wasn't quite at the level that I would have hoped to reach that. But again, all the production elements I thought were really good, really well done. And I was definitely in the vibe of it. So I don't think it's quite up at that 4-star level like some of the ones that, you know, we've really liked, but it felt like a solid, you know, above average hit for me.
Yeah, I had put down a 4, but now that I'm looking at this too, I could probably be a 3.5 because 3.5s are Mr. Denton, Walking Distance, The Lonely, Nightmare as a Child, and A Stop at Willoughby. I definitely think this is right in the
that sounds
Nightmare
like about
as a
the
Child.
right.
Yeah. And then 4s are like 16mm Shrine, Time Enough at Last, Purple Testament. I feel like this doesn't super
quite
down
have
with a 3.5.
Yeah, but I like, again, after several that we really did not like, I was very happy to watch this episode. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it to somebody. I think it's even putting aside the last few episodes we've seen, it's very, it's above average. It feels like the Twilight Zone. It succeeds at what it does. It's just not quite, you know, some of those 4s that you listed were some of the ones we really remembered and like really stuck with you.
Those are definitely better. Yeah, I'm totally good with calling it a 3.5. All right. We did it. Oh, next week's teaser. So I know we've cheated ahead and we watched next week's episode already.
I did, as always, make my note before I watched it on what I thought that it would be, and it's The Mighty Casey, which first off, as soon as I saw that come up as a title, I'm like, oh no, because we've seen it, we've heard so many bad things about it, just like cropping up otherwise. So my guess was it was not going to be good. We'll have to wait till next week to see if that's true. But my guess on what would happen was, you know, obviously I thought Casey at the bat. So I thought it was going to be a ball player goes up for a crucial at bat, you know, it's the bottom of the 9th or something, and gets like this vision of what will happen if he hits it. And this is a weird reference, but I was almost thinking like Last Temptation of Christ, the Martin Scorsese film, where stay with me here, where like the whole second half of the movie is Jesus like up on the cross and gets this opportunity to like come down and not sacrifice himself, and does it and like lives out the rest of his life and sees like all the horrible consequences of that. And then it like flashes back and he's still up on the cross and makes the choice like, no, I will do the sacrifice. And so I realized that's a much more highfalutin like big picture thing but I was thinking he goes up for his at bat, he sees what will happen if he hits it and there's some dire consequence, and decides to like intentionally strike out instead. That was my guess.
Very good guess.
It was not a good guess because I have watched the episode. It has nothing to do with what happened.
Well, you guys may not have, so you can watch it, of course, on US Netflix if you're watching along with us, because next week's episode is episode 35 of season 1 of The Twilight Zone, The Mighty Casey. Thank you so much.
If we've already watched that, can we give them advice to not watch it? Is that okay, or are we sticking with the fiction that they should?
I didn't think it was as bad as I was expecting, to be perfectly honest with you, but we'll see next week. But thank you all for listening. This was, of course, Deja Reviewed. Feel free to leave us a rating and a comment wherever you're listening to us. And if you are enjoying the podcast, please subscribe. You can also find us at DejaReviewed.com, where you can find all of our social media. You can leave us a voicemail, a text, email, all that kind of stuff, tweets, Facebook. We hope you tune in next week.
Deja Reviewed.